What's up, everybody? Welcome back to NRW. I'm your host here, Ram Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because today I'm reviewing the movie The Fabulous Filipino Brothers. I will say right now that I love this movie. This movie I had heard about, I'm going to say probably just under a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago. I can't recall exactly, but I've heard about this film for quite some time because our very own Mr. Kuya P is actually really good friends with the Bosco family. And for those who don't know the last name Bosco, I'm sure you may recognize Dante Bosco, who is most famous for playing the character Rufio in the film Hook. Well, this is his directorial debut with this movie, and he co-wrote the script along with his siblings in Derek, Dion, Darian, and also Ariana, who also starred in the film and produced the film as well. And as cliche as it's going to sound, but this movie had so much heart. It was a very entertaining, very funny film, but at the same time, it's just a really good character-driven story, and the characters, in my opinion, are fantastic. So, of course, with this review, I'm going to get a little to the plot. No spoilers, of course. I will get into my positives, my negatives, and then, of course, my rating. Before they reunite for a wedding, four brothers in Pittsburgh, California have experiences that challenge their beliefs on family, love, and culture. And now let's get into my positives. My first positive is with the relationship between the four brothers. Our very own Kuya P had the opportunity to speak with the Bosco siblings here on the channel on his show, The Show Pass Show. And if you've not checked out that episode, I recommend you guys do so. I'll have the icon for you to click on when to check it out. But when you watch that interview, you can clearly see that the siblings have a very tight family unit. They really do care, respect, and love one another, and that does translate very well on the screen. And the other thing I also appreciate about the brothers is that they all have their own distinct personalities. And for example, like Dante's character, he is the more successful of the four brothers, where he has a very well-paying job and is able to travel around. He dresses very well, lives a pretty for the most part, a lavish lifestyle, I would say. And then Derek, on the other hand, his character is definitely the leader of the group. He's the guy that everyone depends on to do everything. Dion's character, on the other hand, is definitely the irresponsible one, the wild one, if you will, more or less a ladies' man. And Darren is the darker of the brothers. And there's something that occurs in the movie, well, I would say prior to the events of this film, that left him in a pretty sad state where he's definitely very depressed. He isolates himself a lot, and they all show concern for his well-being. He's not suicidal by any means, but he definitely does have a very, very dark atmosphere around him, and they are all concerned for him, but they know they can't do anything about it because he has to be the one that wants to take himself out of that funk. But what I loved about seeing those distinct personalities is that they all get along very well with each other, really, for the most part. I mean, they definitely have some moments where they clash with one another, but the wonderful thing about this movie is that you actually get to spend time with each of the brothers. You get to see their journey as far as who they are as individuals and their flaws and their strengths, and also knowing that they are struggling with certain things that they have to deal with, that they have yet to figure it out to some degree. For example, like the character of Dante's character, what I meant to say. Without getting to spoilers here, there are some choices that he makes that may leave a lot of people questioning his motivation or questioning his morale, if you will. Despite some of the choices he makes, honestly, when you watch the film, it'll make sense. But when I was watching the movie, or watching his scenes, I should say, I actually wasn't mad at the guy. I was actually like, I get it. And I'm not the one support for that. So I have my opinions on what he does, but I wasn't mad at him. For some reason, I actually understood where he was coming from. But at the same time, you're left to question him. But I was actually mad at the guy because it makes sense when you watch the story. When you watch the film, you'll understand where I'm coming from. But what he goes through, the choices he makes, it makes sense, whether you agree with it or not. But you understand it. At least that's how I felt about it. Now, Derek, on the other hand, being the more or less the responsible, the guy that everyone can depend on, you definitely get to see his struggles, how everything is just passed on to him as far as taking care of all the issues that everyone doesn't want to take care of. And his wife definitely does show her concern that you're taking on way too much here. Why can't you just let them do it? He's like, no, don't worry. I'm the guy who's going to take care of everything because I am that man. I'm the one that's taking on this role, so everyone can depend on me to do what needs to be done. but clearly he struggles with a lot, and he's having a hard time balancing those things out. And you get to see how he deals with that, along with having to learn to depend on other people to do their due diligence to help out with the family. Dion, on the other hand, his story is actually the most funny out of everybody. He doesn't really have like some of the same personal struggles that all the other brothers go through. I mean, he definitely does have some struggles that he may be dealing with here, but you don't necessarily see that in this movie. In fact, he actually provides a much more humorous side to the film. He definitely brings that the most out of all the four brothers. But when you get to see his side of the story, I don't know how people will feel about his, I guess the use of this character when you follow his story. But for me, I was thoroughly entertained. Darian's character, on the other hand, this is the one, in my opinion, where it is more or less like the heart of the film, where you really get to see what he's going through and you really understand where he's coming from, and at the same time you can understand why other people his siblings have a really hard time trying to get through to him. And when you do have a moment where Dion and Darren are talking, you can see that Dion, out of everybody, the irresponsible brother, is the one that is able to kind of push him out of that funk, if you will, and kind of start from there to be able to rehabilitate himself and really try to take on the world, and instead of isolating himself from it. So there's one aspect of the character Dion that I really, Dion's character, I meant to say, that I really did appreciate when it comes to his contribution in helping out his brother. Now, as far as Ariana's character in the movie, she narrates in the movie, but she's barely in the film. And when she does make an appearance in the movie, you feel her presence. Without really getting to spoilers here, there is something that occurs when, by the time she makes an appearance, you realize that she's pretty much the glue to the entire family. And again, without getting into spoilers, when you watch the movie, you'll understand where I'm coming from. But when she does make an appearance, it is definitely impactful. At least that's how I felt about it. There's one thing that I really did appreciate about this movie was the honesty that you get to see about how the family is. For example, I can't remember the circumstances all that well for some reason, but I believe their mother was asking one of the brothers to pick up their grandmother at the doctor's and then bring her back home. And I forgot which brother it was, but he was like, nope, I can't do it, and was trying to make excuses as far as why he can't do it. And then then talks about how Dion's character is not doing anything, therefore he can pick her up. And he was like, what? And it's obvious he didn't want to do it either. For some reason, that surprised me, because I honestly thought that they would have this integrity about themselves, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, but that they would be willing to do whatever it takes to help out their grandmother. But instead, they were just like, nope, I don't want to do it. And I found that to be rather shocking. Now, when you watch the movie, there's a humor side about the how they're approaching that here. But when you watch it in real life, it can be looked at as being hugely disrespectful. But in this movie, on the other hand, even though it can be looked down that way, but for some reason, I actually appreciated that they showed that honesty, but bringing the humor to it, to not make it a very dark aspect of the character, but rather a comedic side of it as well, that I thought worked very well for this movie. But another thing I also want to point out too is that despite the fact that a lot of these characters do have flaws, because they are far from perfect, I appreciated that there's no qualms about having to hide those insecurities and hide those flaws of these characters, but instead bring them out to the forefront and seeing them and how they have to deal with it. And that's what I did appreciate about this movie. I'm also going to point out too, one other thing as well about this movie is that in this climate that we're in right now, there's no doubt that the industry has changed a great deal when it comes to how people of color are represented in movies. And I also am in agreement that we definitely need to representation does matter. I really do believe that. But with this movie, I do appreciate the fact that you are following a character's journey, or in this case, a character's journey in this film. Yes, the Filipino culture aspect is definitely infused in this movie. It is part of the story here, but it is about the characters, and the Filipino culture aspect of it is just a way for you to see a different perspective of these characters' journey through their eyes and how they lived here in America, but with their Filipino culture being a part of their family. And that's how I looked at this film. And in a lot of ways, this is also very educational for me too. Now, I've grown up with Filipinos, but I never really was around the culture like that. I mean, our very own Kuya P is very much proud of being a Filipino. He has a show on the channel called The Show Pal Show, which is all about the Filipino culture and talking to various people in the industry in other areas as well too, and having to hear their side of the story and sharing their perspective on what it was like for them growing up, whether here in America or other parts of the world, to hear their experiences and what it was like for them, but also talk about their Filipino culture as they continue on with this story. So to see this movie showcase that, in my opinion, worked very effectively. This is not forcing their culture onto anybody here. It's part of the story, but it was a very effective story, in my opinion, to see a side of American culture. Because in my opinion, the Filipino culture here in America is a part of the culture that I'm not really familiar with here. So for us to be able to see that through their eyes and get in their perspective, it was very, very good, in my opinion. So there was no political agenda here at all by any means. This is just a fun, entertaining story, but with a really good message, great characters with a lot of heart. And there's so much more about this film that I can definitely get into here, but a lot of the things that I did want to point out here are part of that spoiler territory. But I will say, in closing out with my positives, that this is a very, very well-directed movie, because Dante Basco, considering this is his feature directorial debut with this feature film, he definitely has a good eye and in telling a really good, effective story. And there's no doubt that with the years of experience that he's had here with the industry, with working some of the best directors in the industry, with Steven Spielberg being like the top of the heap at this point for a very long time, I know without a doubt that he definitely took some insight about what he had learned on working on Hook, that he definitely did carry with him throughout the years, and then for him to be able to actually put into use with this movie, I think he did a great job. So kudos to Dante and all the other siblings, Derek, Ariana, Dion, Darian, and I'm forgetting someone else too. Yeah, I think I've got everybody. If I left anybody, I apologize. But they've all done a fantastic job in making this a very entertaining but a very heartfelt film. So now that will be the end of my positives. Now let's get into my negatives. There's only really one negative that I have about the movie, and I'm trying to find the best way to describe that negative. So I mentioned before that you get to spend some quality time with each of the brothers and really get to know who they are as individuals. But the one thing I felt that was missing in this movie was getting the parents' perspective of their children. I really thought that we were going to be getting a moment in the film where you get to hear the parents have a talk with their children, like some sort of like to just get their perspective on the brothers or the siblings overall. But you never really got that. I'm not saying that they were not integral in the movie at all. They definitely were, but just not in that capacity. I was hoping that we would get something to that effect, but we never got that with this movie, which I thought was a mistake. And no disrespect to Dante and everyone who with the brothers and his siblings, I'm going to say about that. I'm not trying to be disrespectful about that, but I felt like that was something that I felt was missing, because you get the siblings' perspective, but what about the parents' perspective of the siblings? That's what I really want to see more of. And again, we never got that. There was a few other things too along the way that I thought didn't really work all that well, but that all kind of goes into that spoiler territory here. So obviously I'm not going to get into that here. But that's going to be in my negatives here. So now let's get into my rating. So as you already know, I love this movie. This is a film that I was very much looking forward to when I first heard about it. Like I said before, a little over a year ago, a little less than a year ago. And when I heard the word of mouth about how entertaining and how good this movie was, or is rather, I had high expectations, and those expectations were met and then some. So despite the major flaw that I have about the movie with the lack of the parents' perspective, if you will, this movie still has a lot of great things going for it. When you learn about the family dynamic and their character's journey, and really to spend a lot of time with them and understand their perspective and where they're coming from, and how they're able to kind of come to a proper closure with their story in this film. So for me, I give this movie a solid cheers. And those are my thoughts on the film. This movie will be released on VOD on February 8th, so make sure you guys check out the film. And if you have done so, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And also, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. Make sure you share and like our videos and hit the notification bell while you're down there. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram and Facebook, new release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. Follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and we have social media for the show as well. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I want to thank you all very much for joining me on this review. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.